I'll get it started. All right. Okay, everybody, welcome to our session for today. I title it, and help me maximize the CRM decisions for my startup. So we're going to talk about, basically the purpose of this is, we're going to talk about it, but I've seen many companies struggle with their CRM. It is a whole piece of marketing software that some people are not that experienced with. And, this is something that you have to critically get right. So this is meant for those technical founders who don't know that much about, what's on the CRM stack side, how to set it up, how do you get billed, how do you paid. So this is for you if you are like super technical founder, but you don't have a really clear idea on how CRM works out, how they get billed, how do you pay for that and all of that. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. And as we go along, let me introduce myself. I'm Francisco Guerrero. I've been running this basically training program for AdSpiro marketing, which is kind of like a consulting little thing that I put together. And I'm also giving those classes as well to other companies. Been here in Silicon Valley for, pretty much over a decade. I'm going over 12, 13 years already. And I started my career kind of like deep down in e-commerce, CRM, and then I build upon that digital marketing, ad tech, and all that cool stuff. And, I had the chance to build CRM programs for companies that I used to work for, like HP, like McAfee, like Intuit. And then I joined, startups, and I tried to make my own, which was once upon a time called Shopinterest. It was a really cool Shopify for Pinterest, but we'll get nostalgic some other time, guys. It'll be great to talk about that. And the other thing is, I've seen time and time again how most companies, believe it or not, from Fortune 500 companies to the startups, they just keep making kind of like the same mistakes, and every time they call me, hey Francisco, we need you to migrate a CRM. Hey Francisco, CRM blow up, or we don't know what we're doing with it, or it's not working. Most of these mistakes are very repeatable, so I want to make sure that start here with some fundamentals so you don't make these mistakes. And when I'm not doing all this cool ad tech CRM stuff, you can probably find me in Laguna Seca. You can probably find me with my little car just going out the track. That's how I get my kicks. I take my little car to the track and I'll go out there and try to run as fast as I can. So if any of you guys want to do track, hit me up. We'll talk about that. It'll be great. So let's talk a little bit about, what the CRM decision goes like, and let's feel no shame. Every startup kind of like takes the decision their own ways, but usually it goes like this. And this is, again, from 10 years of experience about all of this. So number one is, your engineers basically use the CRM solution they might be familiar with, right? From a previous job. Hey, I use Hubspot. Hey, I use Salesforce. Hey, I use MailChimp. And that's what they start with because, hey, that's what you know. Probably the most traditional one is, hey, founders just grab every freebies that you can get when you're started. There's no shame. We all know we have a little money, we have to stretch it. But, you start grabbing the freebie that you get from GoDaddy, the freebies from 500 Startups, the freebies from your hosting. So, it's super easy to start patching things from free stuff, but ultimately, you're going to pay for it down the line. So let's not be the first step. Hey, this thing is free. Let's just go ahead and install it because, we're going to find out that it's a lot of time, a lot of effort that you waste. So I don't want you guys to go through that. So your staff uses the CRM they use in a similar company. Maybe, hey, when I was in a company, I did this, kind of like the same story. Or, a lot of companies actually start without a strong CRM foundation. They have really good product, really good messaging, and we'll say that messaging is not CRM. But, some companies really get super big, super huge, and then they really don't start thinking about CRM when they have retention issues, when the product starts to plateau and the growth starts slowing down, or even when you're starting, you really don't want to let your retention go out. So you just start building product and then you forget about the CRM part, and it's fine. You know, some startups are like that, and that's common. That's really, really common as well. Or, you know, sometimes you get a referral. Somebody told you, hey, use this system. It's really good for me. I recommend it to you, which is, you know, probably a step above because it's a recommendation from someone. But, you know, sometimes it's just still not the right system for you, even if it's a referral system. So this is where I don't want any startup, any 500 family to end up here, because this is where a lot of companies just end up here, and it shouldn't be this way. You shouldn't be taking this as normal. We're here to help you, you know, cover with that. So scary statistic number one, and you know, this will, I'll tell you, 95% of the startups will fail, epic fail at implementing their first CRM system. You know, and I know it sounds like a lot, but trust me, I'm not making this a statistic up. Usually you end up, as I said, you grab the first thing that's free, you start building, and then you figure out, hey, this is not the right thing. So that's why we end up there. And, you know, 2/3 of them, even if you're the one that, hey, you did it right, you know, sometimes you're going to have to redo things in the first 24 months. Why? Because you set it up wrong. You probably bought the wrong type of features that you really needed. Or maybe it's a good story. Maybe you're growing so fast and so hard that your real CRM system is too small to handle your stuff. So regardless of how you get there, happy or not happy, statistic number one is CRM systems tend to fail all the time. Now, let's talk about a scary statistic number two, and this is from a survey that I took with the founders of 500Startup like about a month ago when I was putting together the topics for the presentation. You know, I did a little survey to find out, hey, you know, what do you guys want to find out about? And I asked, you know, who's doing the CRM work at your startup right now? And a scary statistic, 50% of the founders right there are the ones doing the CRM work. Now, it's good from one end because CRM is closer to sales, depending how you're doing it, but it's also bad because, hey, you know, it's founder time is precious, guys. Founder time is the only thing that doesn't scale. 24 hours a day has 24 hours a day. So let's make sure that, you know, if the founder is going to spend all this time in CRM, let's start from the right place. Otherwise, the founder is wasting time, the team is wasting time, and we just end up redoing what we should have done right in the first place. So having tell you all of that and scare you a little bit, let's go through what's their best way to figure out how to get to a good CRM foundation so you can build upon that, not that you have to rip it off the wall and throw it away. All right, so hopefully this is making sense. And let's go through the agenda a little bit in more detail, let it breathe. So we're going to talk about what is CRM and what isn't. And, you know, I'm not going to give you the MBA definition. I'm not going to give you the TED Talk definition. It's just something very practical you can stick in your head and it'll work for you. And we're going to talk about, for those of you who want to understand CRM, how does it help marketing? How does it help sales? You know, believe it or not, I had conversations with engineers who've been working and they don't understand, why do we need CRM? Like, what does it do? So we're going to explain it, no worries. The one big thing to understand is you need to know your sales cycle. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the difference between B2B versus B2C CRM systems. We're going to talk about what are the components and, you know, what is it built for, you know. And one of the exercises that I like to start putting in people's head is to design a notification. You know, let's say that you have to do this. Is your system ready? Do you know where the data is coming from? And then we're going to just wrap up the discussion with a little bit about, you know, what CRM vendors are out there, what are your choices, and kind of like summarize and conclusion. And this, by the way, you know, this is kind of like part one of a 10-hour program that I built for startups and for businesses, where I'm actually kind of like managing most of their ad tech needs and their CRM needs. But this is the fundamentals that hopefully you will have. All right, guys, so let's talk about what is CRM and what is not CRM. You know, I always get, hey, Francisco, I have a database. Is that a CRM system? I'm like, no, that's not a CRM system. Hey, Francisco, I have a list of my customers somewhere. I'm like, that's awesome. That's still not a CRM in and of itself. Hey, Francisco, I have Twilio, Facebook Messenger. That's awesome. That's still not a CRM system. You're just doing messaging and transactional stuff, which is a portion of it, but it's not the whole thing. So let's talk about, well, then what is CRM? What is it? So, in a few words, CRM is just stands for Customer Relationship Management. And as I said, I'm going to give you my definition. You're not going to find any book. It's just a practical way to take a look at it and define it as a discipline that involves, exercises in your head and software. So CRM to me is the practice of data collection. So there is a data collection part with a goal of tracking and understanding your users' actions. So it's just not data collection just because you want to have a log, but you want to understand your users' actions. Why? Because CRM will help you respond strategically to the actions of your prospect, of your customer, and what channels they're coming to talk to you in a way that is mutually beneficial to you as the seller of the product and me as the buyer interacting with you, right? That is what CRM ultimately means. You collect data to understand user actions. You start using journeys or paths or whatever you want to call it to strategically produce messaging and actions in different channels, right? So that's the definition. These are the requirements. I need a data collection system that helps me understand user actions where I can respond to that user in a way that it'll work for both of us. So that's what it is. A CRM system is software that allows you to automate and scale this process. Now, usually most people think of CRM as email marketing, but obviously now we have way more digital channels. Once upon a time you did actual print mail, you did a lot of calling through call centers, you probably started with email. Now you have probably another 7 or 8 different digital channels to manage, right? You have Facebook, you can manage them through SMS, through push notifications, through product messages. You can also try to find your users in Facebook, wherever they are, and bring them back. So that's how CRM has advanced. We just keep adding channels to it, but the basics keep working no matter what. So that's one thing to understand about CRM. It's not like search engine optimization where you were doing 10 years doesn't work completely at all now. It builds upon itself. So it's a good thing to learn the basics. So at a high level, let's just talk about what are the components. We're going to go in a deeper dive on this one a little later, but I want you to understand what are the moving pieces of a CRM system. And this is kind of like conceptual, whether you are business to consumer or business to business, you still have something like this. So you're going to have on top your CRM system, and it's made up of data, because remember the definition, we're collecting data. We have content. Why? Because the content is how we're going to respond back to the user. User comes into your CRM system. The response to your CRM system is content. It's a greeting. It's a welcome. It's how are you? It's welcome. We're glad you're here. If you purchased, thank you for your purchase. Then there are what we call in the marketing world campaigns, which are concerted efforts where you are trying to send a message to your user base or your prospect base from different ways. That's basically the campaign management of the CRM system. And then you have the sales channels. So CRM systems, different systems manage different channels, and systems, huge systems like Microsoft 365 or Salesforce probably has a component for every single one of the sales channels. You can have, obviously, your digital website and app. You have a call center. You can have your field sales. You have people in the field. You might have retailers selling product. You might have third parties like affiliates and so on and so forth. So basically, the CRM system will help you collect your data from your online places and offline, right? If you have people in the phones collecting data, you're also collecting data offline. Then you put that data on your system, you create copy, you're gonna save images, you're gonna save offers, then you're gonna figure out what channels you're gonna use and what you're campaigning. So these are the moving components, just to keep them in mind. And we're gonna go a little deeper a little later to understand, hey, what drives billing? How does this work? So far, hopefully everything's making sense. I will kind of like have some time for questions at the end. But if something pops up really like somebody wants to know, please let me know. Okay, making sure nobody is in the meeting room. Hey, we've got someone else join us. Boris, thank you for joining us. Awesome. Okay, guys, so okay, so let's talk a little bit about CRM as part of marketing, right? So this is kind of like the natural place what most companies see CRM. Sometimes they see it as part of product, but in my experience, most of the companies think of CRM, consumer messaging, as somewhere in the marketing function department. But how does it help you? You know, number one, it helps you manage the customer life cycle. And life cycle is just a fancy word to say, hey, you're managing your customer from the moment he's interested on you, looking for you online, to all the way where he or she starts using your product and services. You're going to grow the relationship. Eventually, you will probably lose that customer, lose some engagement, and also try to have retention. So that's the cycle of life. And CRM helps you manage that relationship with your customer. And what are you going to be doing? You're going to be delivering messages to either you're going to increase product discovery, you're going to increase customer value, monetary or attention if you have a game or an app that you need them in there, or to decrease user attrition, basically retention. These are kind of like the three main roles for a CRM system. When a company is thinking about, hey, I need to have a CRM system, is one of these three. Like it's rarely some other reason. It's usually, hey, we want to talk better to our customers to increase what they know about us, or we want to sell more to our customers, or we want our customers not to go away. So these are the main functions from a marketing standpoint in the CRM perspective. Now let's talk about on the sales portion, because also CRM, for a lot of people who have experienced CRM from the sales side, right? Like Salesforce started as a sales tool for salespeople. You know, we are 12, 15 years ago in Salesforce. Now it's basically Microsoft. But once upon a time, it was, you know, here's a tool for salespeople. And you are managing a process that has multiple touches, right? The decision maker, the person who's going to buy your product or your service, might need multiple people to make that decision. So that's why you're thinking of a CRM like, oh, I need to manage the sales process. I need to have information on every decision maker. Maybe I have 3 people involved in the sale from my team, so I also have to manage that. So it also helps you assign specific actions to your sales staff. So another function of CRM is based on the user's profile. You can assign to a salesperson, you can assign an automated phone call, you can assign an email. So basically, kind of like the same way in the sales part, you're still assigning specific actions to respond back to your lead. And then a CRM system is going to be basically tracking inputs and outputs. You're tracking all the AdWords status of all the messages you're sending, everything that's coming back from those messages, and the sales process. So when you're thinking of CRM as part of sales, it's also the sales process that tends to be longer. And also, the other thing about CRM systems now, they used to be self-contained a long time ago, but now they connect to everything. You can connect it to your SAP, to your Google Analytics, you can connect it to your checkout. Basically, you can connect your CRM now in a sense that it can work with other parts of other systems where, you know, maybe companies that are really serious and sell a lot through digital email, they connect their CRM directly to the SAP for revenue recognition, right? Because the moment you buy something from an email, SAP has to know revenue has been taken. So CRM can expand. You know, CRM, don't think of CRM as, hey, only messages and marketing, but it also tends to connect with other parts of the business as well. So let's take a moment, and having mentioned what we said, is one of the critical parts to start thinking, okay, what CRM do I need, Francisco? What really makes sense for me is understand your sales cycle. So, you know, I'm going to go faster there. Everybody kind of knows the difference between B2B and B2C. B2C is, you know, you're selling to an individual. You only need one person to agree to the sale. I'm selling a t-shirt. I'm selling a $20 a month subscription. It's a quick process. You're not going to have a sales staff. You know, all you have to figure out is I'm going to sell online, offline, or both. But it's kind of like a simpler kind of process. However, if you have a longer process, you know, you might be selling enterprise software. You might be selling health products, or you might be selling to government, where it requires a long time, a long cycle, and then you might need sales staff to enable the sale. You might be paying commission. So you got to start thinking first, okay, my sales process, at least what I have right now, is this. Is it short? Is it long? Does it require one decision maker, many? You have to describe your own, kind of like your own ideal customer. You know, everybody loves a customer that immediately gives the credit card and goes, but perhaps that's not your kind of sale. So long sales process, B2B, we already talked about it. But there's some consumer processes that are really long, like weddings, right? Well, wedding takes months, and it's a consumer process, but it's many people that have to agree to things. Things like real estate. If I buy a home, it's not like put in my credit card and go. There's many moving parts, insurance, things like that. So sometimes consumer or long processes can be in the consumer marketplace. And the B2C short sales process is also, pretty well known, but there are small businesses or SaaS companies that use B2C strategies to grow, right? Like Slack, Box, and Dropbox are not waiting for the CTO of IBM to call them. You can go, you can sign up for free, you can sign up a few people. So there's, even if you're into a kind of like business software, you can take a B2C approach. So understand what type of software will work for you. If you want to have something like Slack, where anybody can sign up in the company, and then later on you sell them kind of like the higher value version of it. So this is for all of founders to understand, okay, know your sales process, because this is going to be critical for you to pick a good CRM system. Otherwise, you end up with e-commerce companies that have HubSpot CRMs, and I'm like, why do you have HubSpot? Or you end up with, business companies that have MailChimp, and I'm like, why do you have MailChimp? So, let's pick the right tools, because you want to make sure you pick the best tools. All right, so what are the questions to answer to pick the best solution? So we talked about defining sales cycle, so that's very important. We talked about what channels do you want to support initially, right? If you want to be completely digital, you might need one system. If you want to have customer support, call centers, sales staff, you're probably going to need a completely different system. What content do you need to support, and how often does it change? This is for the retailers, for the companies that are based into a lot of content that changes a lot. So, some CRMs are not designed for you to be changing creative and do dynamic 10,000 products. You need to figure out if you can support it. And are you going to connect your CRM to some other system, sales, finance, whatever? But then one of the critical parts, and this, I want everyone to pay attention to this one, is as your startup grows, and I work with many startups on different stages, sometimes there is no dedicated marketing team. Sometimes you got to pick a CRM that is going to be mainly used for your engineers to at least have a patchwork of messages. And that's fine. There are CRMs out there that are like API driven, that are very code driven, that you can hand this to your engineers and they'll be able to figure it out. But, there's other types. If you want to get a Salesforce implementation, you probably need to get Salesforce, certification, because it's not quick and easy to learn. Or, you also might thinking, hey, I'm not doing the marketing. The engineers are not doing the marketing. I have my marketing staff doing the marketing. So let's give them a tool that they can use and be self-sufficient, something like a MailChimp account or something like that. So always keep in mind, because sometimes I've been to startups where, hey, we have this tool for CRM. And I'm like, guys, I'm not a full coder. I can't connect to APIs on the fly. I can use your solution. And then we have to figure out, do we hire people for the solution or do we change the solution? So that's where things tend to be a conflict. So, and also the other thing to think about is who's going to put data into the system, right? If it's all digital, then you pick a system that works really well, but you might have customer success, you might have sales support, sales, things like will require a CRM system that you're going to put data from your team members to make that sale. So start thinking, is this something that I want my engineers to use for now? Is this something that I can have a trained user if I'm using a big tool, or is this something that I can hand off to a marketing, sales, non-technical team member, let's call it that way, and they can be self-sufficient? Because otherwise you spend too much time serving the marketing team. And I told this to many startups, guys, I understand nobody has time, just give marketing the tools they need so they can be self-sufficient, as opposed to try to use engineering hours to do, an email or a marketing campaign. So understand who is going to use the CRM. So after we said all of that, right now let's talk about a little bit in detail on the components of a CRM solution. And we're gonna kind of like blow it up a little bit to understand what does it make. So, the big components will be your product, your app, whatever you're using to input data. We're going to talk about event managers, which right now, because some companies have 3 or 4 or 5 different CRM systems, are useful to send data to many different systems, set it up one time, send it everywhere. And you're also going to talk about are you going to have dedicated marketing tables or not? And this is a topic for the people who want to be really active in marketing, don't want the marketing people to be messing up with kind of like product tables. So if you want to do that, you also have to think about that. And there's other parts of CRM like segmentation systems, analytics systems, financial reporting. So let's talk about what this looks like as a whole. So here's an example, just putting the pieces together for kind of like a random product. And this is kind of like your typical startup setup, right? I took this example. This is not, this is not going to be like a bigger company like PayPal, where I used to work at, or McAfee. This is kind of like your typical startup. Patch it up, let's do it. So you have a product on your left-hand side, sending data. You may or may not have a data warehouse. Sometimes you just are querying directly into your production tables, and hopefully you're not breaking anything. Then there is tools that people can use for data visualization. Tableau, probably has grown in cost, but Tableau used, when it was a little bit cheaper, it was really, really awesome. There's things like Amplitude that I've used as well. Looker that also tends to do really well for that. So then in the center, I put Segment. It is a tool that I've used. It's basically what I call an event manager or a data manager. What Segment does, for those of you who haven't used it, is basically you create your fields of data one time, and Segment figures out how to connect them to different systems. So if you need to get first purchase date from your product, you set it up in Segment, and then Segment will feed it up to all of your other marketing systems. So you're not setting it up one time for each system. It's really useful, specifically when you have your Android app, your iOS app, your website, they're all sending data. Segment kind of like clears it out and sends it to the systems that you have. And then you're going to have a marketing automation systems like the CRM systems that we know. There's Braze, that is a CRM system, usually really good for e-commerce. There's Twilio for the people that are actually doing a lot of phone calls and SMS instead of emails. You have A/B testing tools. You might have internal testing tools, or Braze has one. And then you have attribution tools, right? Attribution tools like Branch, like Newstar, where they tell you, hey, the things that came from your app, this is where the installs are coming from. So as you can tell, CRM system, if you put it together through different products, this is kind of like what it looks like. And there's also the option, and we'll talk about a little later, of getting every single thing from one vendor, which is where you're going to go and get a Salesforce deal or a Microsoft 365 deal or an Adobe deal, right? We'll give you every single piece of this. So, so far, let me know if there's any questions. I'll continue. I think this is making sense, but drop the questions in the chat if you want to stop or ask a question. All right, so let's talk right now. Let's take a stop and say, okay, Francisco, so what's out there? I'm interested. I'm thinking what's out there. And, let's talk about some of the vendors. This is by no means an exhaustive list. There's thousands of vendors. These are the ones that I've used myself personally, and I can, help you with those and tell you what's the difference. Now, most companies start with transactional. So transactional email is a necessity. It's basically you have to send receipts. You have to, you have to set up your password resets. You have to create invoices and things like that, right? You receive transactional messages are part of CRM, but they have to exist, and sometimes they're separate. You don't have to unsubscribe from a transactional email. And you have options like SendGrid, which is very, very common, very well used by 500 startups. There's Salesforce Marketing Cloud, who has a transactional instance. There's Sailthrough, there's Twilio, and Facebook Messenger has actually started in this game. I know I worked with the implementation that they did with PayPal, but basically you can start delivering your transaction receipts through Facebook Messenger if you want to. So that's another way for you. If you want to stay in touch with your customers, maybe you're not sending your regular notifications through an email, you can also use Facebook Messenger in some instances. For kind of small email clients, there's MailChimp, MyEmma, Tiny Newsletter, GetResponse, Constant Contact. On the medium size, you're talking about $20, $30, maybe $50,000 a year, also depending on your size, and we'll talk about what will drive the cost. There's things like Constant Contact, Iterable, Movable Ink, And from the B2B side, Marketo, Pardot, real well. And then there's enterprise, right? This is where you want to go big, or you want to make a deal with Salesforce. So you say, hey, I'll buy your stuff. So there's Responses, which I think was bought by IBM. There's Silverpaw, bought by Adobe, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Adobe, Microsoft 365, and probably another 6 or 7 of the big guys on CRM. And we're going to talk about what's good and bad when you go through a big vendor versus somebody more kind of like smaller. So let's talk about also very big important thing is how do they bill you? You know, this is probably one of the least or one of the most misunderstood parts of CRM. Like people don't know what it costs. They see, $20 a month in the pricing page and they think that's what it is, and that's not how it works. So how much does it cost? What are the factors that will drive how much are you going to pay? And keep in mind, guys, I mean, I work for startups and I work for PayPal who was paying, I kid you not, $600,000 or $700,000 a year for our instance of a CRM system, right? So the cost can be huge. So let's talk about what drives the cost. So number one is going to be the number of records in your database. That's usually for most of the vendors out there, that's kind of like the starting point. How big are you in terms of records? If you're kind of small, starting, you're less than 500,000 records, you're probably going to do some sort of smaller subscription deal that will handle your capacity. But as you grow in number of records, eventually you will pay more. Also, the volume of messages, this is part number 2 of the price. So the more messages you will send, the more they will charge you. And also one thing to understand, guys, is an email and an SMS and a push notification usually have 3 different costs. Push notifications are usually free because, at least for the moment, you're using the system to push a message through your app. Nobody's charging you for that. You can do an SMS, but SMS costs money, and different CRM systems will charge you different prices. You'll find out. And then you have email, good old email, that the number of messages that you're sending out will determine your price. The number of data fields that you will need, this is for the guys that are in fintech or doing games. The more fields you are to your database in your CRM, the more they're going to charge you. And then there's features offer, right? There's rendering tools for your emails and your ads. There's extra QA, deliverability, making sure your email doesn't end up in spam. So there's also other features that you may or may not need. And also one big important one is tech support. Most of the startups find this the hard way. You pick the cheap plan, you pick the free plan, and tech support is somebody who will reply to your email 5 days from now asking more questions. So understand what your capacity to deal with support is, right? Because support will cost you more money. Usually the companies will say, here is our kind of like our subscription, but if you want 24-hour response, you're going to pay more. And also ask what it is. Because sometimes 24-hour response just means they'll just reply to you. It doesn't mean they're going to solve your problem in 24 hours. It just means somebody will be at least getting that. And another part to figure out your CRM cost will be, are you going to do self-service completely, meaning all you're paying is for access to the system, and you have a person dedicated to basically do all the lists, upload the data, do all of the email creative, do all of the messages, and it goes out? Or do you need an agency model? And most of the larger clients will say, yes, we have help. For startups, there's no shame. Sometimes you don't have the necessary talent, and if you need to look for a company that has a little bit of agency support or account support, so that way you can call someone and they'll help you deal with those little CRM issues that not everybody knows. So think of, do you need self-service? Will be cheaper versus you might need some sort of version of full service, some support hours. At least an account manager will be useful. So let's make sure you at least have an account manager or somebody to call and say, hey, we're having a problem, as opposed to pick the free plan and nobody talks to you. So keep that in mind, guys. And I have a whole module that I'll tell you exactly how to break down this and how the companies actually manage to squeeze money out of you with that. But for now, this is important. This is critical. I want you to understand this is how your bill gets calculated when you're using CRM systems. So the models out there, there's how do you pay? Pay attention, because there's free models. They're likely for a small list below 10,000. I think MailChimp has a free one that it's like 1,000 people. one email a month, you know, if you're like in the Boy Scouts, something like that. You have a base subscription. You have payment per seat. So also, guys, this is another way that you're paying per CRM is you're going to pay per person that needs to have access. And it's not only the marketing user. Most of the time, you're going to have a couple of engineers doing tests for push notifications or email. You're going to have an admin. So you end up having 5 or 6 or, you know, users of the software, and they're going to pay. You have to pay per each one of those users. Some of them have basically some pay per service and a base subscription, or pay per service plus the volume of records and messages, or they're unlimited something. This is a new model that I've seen, like, hey, we do unlimited contacts. We don't charge you if you give us 1,000 or 1,000,000, but everything else they will charge you for. So these are kind of like the way that you will tend to see, you know, these are the models for CRM. The most common ones when you're small is a subscription. But remember, once you break the subscription level, they basically bump you up to the next level. So if you sign a CRM deal that says, hey, I'm going to get, let's say, no more than 100,000 users, the minute you go over, what ends up happening is they're not going to stop your service. They're just going to bump you to the next level. And then the next month, your bill will probably be, you know, 2x or more. So understand that it kind of works like cell phone billing, guys. You know, if you're not looking at what you're using, they just keep billing you. And at the end of the month, you get a bill. So this is how you're thinking about how do you pay for CRM, what builds up the cost of CRM. Okay, sorry, this one we already talked about. I just broke it into consumer and business tools for CRM, B2B, B2C. Okay, so let's talk kind of the centralized versus decentralized debate, because this is something that you need to understand for your startup. So centralized means just big, huge company. Salesforce, Microsoft, Oracle, what have you. The pros is basically every single part of the service you get an all-in-one. You're getting Salesforce for marketing, for support, for call center, for everything. You can scale up really fast because they already have everything set up for you. And the compatibility between, you know, the stack is obviously assured because they own everything, right? Your SDK will work with all the 3 modules of Salesforce because that's how they build it. Now, there's some cons as well. You know, number one is you don't get to use the best of breed services. So understand that the big partnerships like Salesforce, they have like the club of cool people. And if you're not in the club of cool people, you know, you cannot connect to their solution. And then you might have a really cool, you know, email rendering system, but it doesn't connect to the rest of the system. So you can't use it. They're not compatible. Now, bigger systems will require, you know, basically people to support them. If you're willing to sign a deal with Salesforce or Microsoft, you're going to have to get, you know, Salesforce certified people to basically do the implementation. And also higher price, which is obvious at this point. And the other thing is Force SDKs. This is something that I struggle a lot with Salesforce, even at PayPal. Basically just get a notification like, hey guys, we need to make a change in our SDKs. You have like a week or 2 weeks or a month. And I'm like, well, the product roadmap was signed on 3 months ago and I don't even have any resources. So keep in mind that when you're working with the big guys, you know, if they need to push an SDK for security reasons or whatever, you know, you're going to have to throw up your hands and do the SDK update. Otherwise, everything comes to a halt. So understand the difference between centralized and decentralized. Now, a decentralized solution is kind of like what we were looking at the beginning. You're going to take different parts and you're going to pick the best that wants to work with you. You can pick something like Braze or Freshworks or Soho or Irritable. Basically, you're going to build your CRM. You're going to build those parts yourself, 3 or 4 or 5 different parts. The pros are super quick deployment. You know, these tools are meant to be used and deployed really, really fast. They're meant to be low cost. And they usually work with other tools. That's how they grow. Kind of like the cons on using decentralized solution is, you know, some companies are small, obviously. The support can be deficient. You know, many of the smaller companies have knowledge bases and very, very small customer support team. So when you are getting difficulties on things like that, don't expect a lot of support. And then as you grow along and you're building your company, it kind of becomes harder to keep track of all the updates that the different systems will need, right? If you were working with Salesforce, you just need to do one SDK and it's done. If you have a decentralized solution, you might have 2 or 3 SDKs sending data to 2 or 3 different systems, and then one of them breaks, you have to update it. So understand that, there is, both benefits and cons, whether you go centralized solution or decentralized solution. Got it. So as we're kind of like coming into an end of our presentation for today, I just want to give you this exercise, and I give this exercise to get you started. Do you have this available? You had to do this right now. Could you do it? What system, what data thing? So here's the task. And I'm just going to take like about 2 or 3 minutes here, take a breather and just let you think. And here's the task. I'm your big marketing CMO boss, and I said, hey, Danielle, I need you to send a survey 3 days after the first purchase, and make sure you send them by different method of payment. Whoever pays cash gets one survey, and whoever pays by credit card gets another survey. So that's the task, right? Very simple. I just need to send a survey. These are my requirements. And what I want you to think is, okay, what data do you need? Where is it right now? If you have to get the data needed to do this ad hoc message, where is this data? What systems within your company have this data? How often is refreshed, right? Do you have recent data? You've done. Are you validating your data or not? Do you have a valid email, a valid phone number, or are you just entering an email and whatever they enter, that's what you get? Then, other thoughts like, how do you send the survey, right? Are we gonna do, is this in a mail? Is this an email? Is this something else? And then who should be excluded, right? Should we not include people in the survey? How do I exclude them? What are the people to exclude from the survey if there were someone to be excluded? So I'm just gonna give you kind of like 2 or 3 minutes, and as you start thinking of, hey, if I had to do this, where does this data live? What systems do I have in place to do it? Because this is like kind of like your typical CRM need. It's Tuesday morning and your boss wants you to do this. So, wow. Start thinking about it. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes and then we'll just wrap up. All right. Let me also here. All right, guys. So, a few more seconds, then we'll start talking about this and start thinking of where is all this data and how does it come together. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about this little exercise and start figuring out, if we can put this data together, or if we fail at our current capacity and not be able to send it. So what data do you need? So the data that you will need will be obviously start with, you need the customer information data, right? You need to know who is it, what's the person. You probably want to know the product that they purchased, right? At least to understand, hey, I'm sending you a survey because you bought what, or you signed up to what. So then now you need customer information. Now you need to understand what product did they bought. Do you have that in your CRM system? Now let's talk about, I clearly told you that I need to send a survey 3 days after the user's first purchase, right? So this assumes that you have purchase history in your CRM, and you can produce, well, you can produce a first purchase date, right? So, hey, here it is, Francisco. Here's my first purchase date for the customer. It's right here. And can you split it by method of payment? And this is kind of like a little bit of a wrench, because a lot of CRM systems may not track kind of like the information at the payment level. Like, yeah, I know you order from me, but I'm not exactly, CRM exactly might not be actually doing method of payment unless you have it in the order somewhere. So now you may or may not have to get data from a different system into your CRM, so you can split your customer data by method of payment. So what systems is this data on, right? You're going to have your CRM system that's probably on your production system that has the information of the customer. You might have some data in your billing system, and you might have some data in your sales system, right? So what to do? Is the data validated or not? Do we have good emails or not? And guys, you know, I have a whole class on deliverability, but let me tell you, you know, your emails will end up in spam if you don't validate your email. So if you're getting an email and you're not taking the time to tell people, hey, click on an email, make sure it's valid, you're going to end up trashing your reputation for deliverability, and then it's going to go to spam folder. Whether you need to send a survey, you know, you might want to do MailChimp, you want to do something like that, and then it should be excluded, right? Usually when we do customer satisfaction surveys, you also want to pay attention to, hey, if they cancel the order, you don't want to send that. If their credit card bounced back or they owe you money, you might not want to send it. So maybe now we need data from collections, right? I don't know. I don't want to send this survey to people that owe us money. I don't want to send this survey to, you know, people who we rejected their credit card. So now you need another set of data. So understand that the CRM system, you know, this is kind of like typical, and you have to have this information to execute. And this will give you a sense of, oh, where is all this data living, and what do I need to bring it back in? So hopefully this has been useful. And kind of like just to bring it down for our conclusion is, you know, CRM systems have a number of basic components, and some companies will give you every single component and some will give you parts. CRM systems are going to be different based on major criteria. How long your sales process is, how many people are involved in your sales process. Are you B2B or B2C? And who's going to be the main user on a day-to-day basis using the CRM? So that's critical. Now, to recap, how am I going to pay? How much will this cost me? So the cost will be driven by the number of your users, the size of your database, volume of messages, the channels, features, support, and account service. That's what your bill will made of. So understand when you're signing up for a CRM service, hey guys, understand how many users can I have with this plan? What's the maximum number of messages? What happens when I have extra messages? Are you going to overcharge me? Can we agree to a deal? Whatever, understand where the cost is coming from. And also, you know, make a decision, kind of like as your company, do you want to start with a decentralized solution where you're picking the best systems, or you would like to instead start with a bigger solution, something like a Salesforce or a Microsoft, and then carry on with that decision. So hopefully this has been kind of like useful. And as I said, I have like a whole deeper dive into more CRM and ad tech and how to deal with setting up your data, how to migrate, which is another big problem when people realize, you know what, Francisco, this CRM system not working for us. How do I migrate a system? There's another set of training that I have as well available for all of that. And at the side of AdSpiro Marketing, if you want to look it up, you can sign up for other things. But as 500 Startups, you know, ping me up. I'm here to help. So I can always come in and help when you're getting issues with CRM, setting up. Deliverability, your emails are going to spam, you know, call me, I'll help you out. It's hard, but it's not rocket science. You can certainly get out of the penalty box if you end up there. So thank you, everybody. Really happy you spent this time. I hope this has been helpful. And please, you know, let me know if you need anything else. You can reach me through AdSpiro Marketing or through the 500 Startups Slack channel. Thanks again, everyone. All right. Okay, I'm going to cut it off. Bye, Danielle.